Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
You are listening to the TrekRanks podcast, a member of the Tricorder Transmissions Podcast Network. This is episode 71, featuring the top 5 meta Trek references. Welcome, Star Trek fans. I am Jim Moorhouse. I am the host of the TrekRanks podcast, and tonight we have a deep cut topic. It's not the kind of topic that you can just kind of whip together any old list in a couple of minutes by thinking about your favorite episodes. This is one of those very deep cut topics that you got to think about, these little hidden moments inside of Star Trek where the writers and producers and actors kind of wink at the audience and they wink at themselves, and they basically are referencing Star Trek the show inside Star Trek the show. So it's our top 5 meta Trek references, and we're going to get into exactly what that means here in a couple of minutes in our diagnostic cycle. But for a topic like this one that really gets into the fabric of Trek, we really needed to get a couple of Star Trek experts on for this show, and that's exactly what we have tonight with our 2 guests. First up, returning for his 7th appearance on TrekRanks, is the host of the live Star Trek podcast and YouTube show Trek Live, and he spends most of his waking hours ranking Trek on his Twitter feed. He is our friend Bill Mann. Welcome back, Bill.
Has it really been 7 times? Wow.
7 times, man. 7 times.
That's awesome. Appreciate you having me. Excited to do this. To hit this particular topic because it really made me think, and it was a challenge. So thrilled to be here. Looking forward to it. This
one is a challenge. It's 7 because it counts twice because you were on the ships and the part 1 and part 2 of ships.
Oh yeah,
ships
yeah.
And the ships. So
yep.
All right, and then our other Trekspert tonight is the great Ross Webster, who is the host of the amazing Snap Trek podcast, one of our absolute favorites, and he has submitted some of the most amazing lists in the temporal causality loop right here on TrekRanks. So you've heard him before, and he was on our awesome top 5 shapes in Trek, one of those wacky TrekRanks topics. So Ross, welcome back, man.
Thank you so much for having me back. What an introduction. That was really lovely. I'm really excited to be back on TrekRanks. I absolutely love listening to this podcast. So it's such a thrill for me.
Well, we love listening to both you guys and Jen, your co-host as well on Snap Treks. All right, so really, really glad I have you guys on this show because we not only need people that know their Trek inside and out for a show like this, but we need guests who have that unique way of thinking about Trek, and that's you two guys. So, all right, let's get into our TrekRanks recalibration and get this show started.
What are you recalibrating? Everything. It's a sweeping, a recalibration of all systems.
First up, as regular listeners will know by now, general order number 1 here at the TrekRanks podcast is that we love Trek and we love to rank Trek via some deep dive topics just to get the conversation started, because my favorite thing to do is to talk about Star Trek.
But what is that Vulcan motto? Infinite diversity.
In infinite combinations.
And what is diversity? A celebration of differences.
TrekRanks is basically just a big old celebration of differences. There are no wrong answers at TrekRanks. And you know what? To get you in the spirit of tonight's topic, that T'Pol and Dr. Phlox reference right there was kind of a meta Trek reference, because basically you've got them explaining the IDIC, the infinite diversity and infinite combinations. So kind of a meta Trek reference right there at the top of the show. So, all right, it's not about being right or definitive in any way here on TrekRanks. It's about sharing the things that we love about Star Trek. We love it all, from TOS to TNG, straight through Enterprise and the Kelvin timeline, and now Discovery and short treks as well. It's all fair game here on the TrekRanks podcast.
Black alert. Black alert.
And a reminder that this episode of TrekRanks is current through Discovery Season 2 and through the 3rd short trek of Season 2, Ask Not. So potential spoilers are in play for all 700-plus hours of Trek. And one final reminder that we use episodes as shorthand, but the 13 films are always in play as well.
Hailing frequencies are open.
And you can find TrekRanks on the Net Access interface links at TrekRanks.com, and you can connect with me directly on Twitter at TrekRanks or at Enterprise Extra. You can also call and leave us a message with your own picks at 609-512-LLAP. That's 609-512-5527. And for those of you enjoying all of our shows here at the Tricorder Transmissions Podcast Network, you can support us via Patreon at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. Okay, to wrap it up, Bill and Ross, why don't you guys let everybody know how they can get a hold of you on the Net Access interface? Bill?
You can find me on Twitter at TrekFan4387. As I am one to do, I'm usually rewatching something Star Trek related, posting episode reviews, posting polls, posting rankings, all that kind of good stuff. And I'm also on Trek Live, usually on Saturday or Sunday mornings, Eastern Standard Time in the U.S., talking about whatever's current, if there's new current Trek or throwback, whatever kind of floats our boat kind of topics. Live stream conversations on YouTube that are kind of loosey-goosey, not real scripted, very casual, meant to kind of capture the spirit of walking around a convention and bumping into somebody in line and, getting into a casual, relaxed conversation. Feel free to stop by and take part.
That's a great description. That's exactly what it is. And Ross, how about you, man? How can people get a hold of you?
So I'm also best found on Twitter. I'm midway through a season 2 TOS rewatch, and I post a lot of Star Trek related poetry. So if that's your thing, at STRTRK1701, or the Snaptrek podcast is also on Twitter at Snaptrek. So
and we would be remiss if we didn't talk about your feat from about a month ago of your first letter tweet threads of the entire reverse order of the Enterprise theme and the TOS introduction. It was amazing. It's basically, he tweeted for about 3 straight months, people, where the first word in each of his tweets, when read backwards in a thread, was Faith of the Heart. It was incredible.
I appreciate the fact that you've enjoyed that, because it took me a very long time to do, and my God, it's so hard to not reply to people on Twitter. When you have like a funny thing to say or a joke, you mustn't reply. Just stick to the plan.
Stick to the script. It was crazy. It's well worth checking out. I don't know if you have it pinned on your site or.
You know what? It's just there. You have to scroll down. It was my 10,000th tweet.
That's right. It was a plan for his 10,000th tweet. That's right. All right. Incredible.
Made me sweat.
Amazing. All right. Let's get into this level 1 diagnostic.
Diagnostic cycle will be complete in 20 seconds.
Okay, so this week's diagnostic cycle is pretty critical to define exactly what we mean by a meta Trek reference. So what we're looking for this topic is some kind of on-screen or in-universe reference in the show that winks to the production of Star Trek. So it's a kind of thing that kind of breaks the fourth wall, either really subtly or maybe really directly. And the most obvious example of this, and the one that I will reveal right now because it's kind of the sacred chalice of Ricks when it comes to meta Trek references, and that is Zefram Cochrane in the TNG film Star Trek First Contact, when he says on screen for the first time the words Star Trek.
Poverty, disease, war, they'll all be gone within the next 50 years.
But unless you make that warp flight tomorrow morning, before 11:15, none of it will happen.
And you people, you're all astronauts on some kind of Star Trek.
Look, Doc, I know this is a lot for you to take in, but we're running out of time here.
So that is the kind of meta Trek reference that we're talking about. And because that one's like the king, we're not going to, we've told everybody not to pick that one today. So we're not going to talk about that one in our picks, but we're going to talk about it now as kind of the top meta Trek reference you can possibly have, with James Cromwell saying the word Star Trek for the first time on screen. What did you guys think of that moment when it happened?
I think it's cute. I don't want to say it takes me out of the movie, but it's certainly jarring in the sense that, unlike some of the things I'm going to choose here, I'm not going to get into too much yet until we get to that part. It screams, look at us, we're being meta, maybe a little more than some of the other choices that maybe are hopefully going to get talked about in our lists. But it is cute, and it's a neat monkey to get off their back that they did it.
That's interesting. Well, before I comment, Ross, how about you? What did you think of when you saw that in the theaters for the first time?
I mean, it feels right. It's a touch on the nose, but I did enjoy it. I do enjoy sort of a little wordplay, and so when they throw the actual Star Trek title into a sentence, I can get behind it. It didn't take me out of it, but I definitely was totally aware that that's what they were doing.
Yeah, it didn't take me out of it either. I feel like they earned it so well for having been, having done this for 30 plus years, that moment was really well earned, and it really worked in the moment and the way it was presented. But for sure, I mean, it has to be on the nose if you're going to say the word Star Trek.
Yeah,
in Star Trek. So
for sure.
But I think it works, and I think it really holds up. It's a pretty iconic moment. So, okay, that's awesome. Let's jump into our Prime Directives and figure out exactly how everyone narrowed down their list.
I do not concur with your captain's decision.
She's following our Prime Directive.
Define Prime Directive.
So, Bill and Ross, how did you guys come up with your list and make your final picks? Because this is a tough one. It's not just, you can't just brainstorm this one and come up with your full list. So, Bill, how did you come up with your list?
You said it in my other appearances on TrekRanks. A lot of those topics, the challenge was taking 25 or 30 sometimes like guttural, quick, pop into my head sort of possibilities and whittling it down. Where this one, I was glad you ran it by me and gave me plenty of notice, because it took a lot of reflection on the franchise of all the shows, the movies. And to be honest, I consulted with my dad, my brother, who are also fans, just casual kind of bouncing ideas around. And some of the stuff they talked about ends up in my list. So I kind of referenced with the Zefram Cochrane thing, I tried to go a little bit, certainly it's meta, so it has to be self-aware, but a little more on the subtle side of things for most of them than perhaps that main example, I guess.
No, that makes sense. A little more on the subtle side. How about you, Ross?
Yeah.
Nothing you do is subtle, by the way, Ross.
Well, it's hard, isn't it? Because it isn't something you can't think of an episode which is meta, or, I mean, right. You can think of some episodes that are a little meta, but it's more moments and snippets and tiny bits that you've probably collected. I'd certainly thought about this for a while before you even suggested the topic, which are those meta bits where they don't just name drop, but they sort of acknowledge or utilize that Star Trek exists as a science fiction show in the real world, and they play with it and demonstrate that degree of self-awareness. And I thought there might only be a handful of times this would happen, but actually, if you really think about it, there are a good few. Mm-hmm. And so it actually took me a little while to come down with the ones I thought were the best. So I am interested to see what your lists are going to be like. Yeah, likewise. It's funny, and Bill, you referenced, I did give you guys more time than normal for a topic when I approach guests. But I'll tell you, I also put you guys to work, because I've been thinking about this one for a long time. So I've been keeping notes for probably a year. Okay, well, that could be a good one whenever we do meta Trek references. It's a little bit easier for me because I had a long list of things that I stumbled on or found over the past year that I've been keeping records on. So I ended up with pretty good long list, and was able to narrow it down to my top 5 that I want to talk about. So. All right, let's get into the order of things with Third Ramadaklan.
I am a Jem'Hadar. He is a Vorta. It is the order of things.
Thank you, Third Ramadaklan. And as always, just a quick reminder on how we're going to go through the order of things. First, each of us will reveal our 5-word summary and a hashtag to tease our pick. Then we'll reveal our meta Trek reference and the specific episode in which it appeared, and then we'll talk a little bit about why we chose that episode and why it made our list. So at the end, we'll ask everyone for a few secondary system selections for the picks that maybe just missed their list. And as always, if we have any duplicate picks, make sure you listen for the Defiant Torpedoes. Okay, Bill, let's kick this off with you. What's your number 5 pick for a meta Trek reference?
So the first one I'm gonna go with here is less on the subtle side, to contradict myself right off the bat. My 5 words in a hashtag. Armin Shimerman echoes Patrick Stewart. Hashtag the line must be drawn here from the Dogs of War at the very end of Deep Space Nine. Quark literally quoting Patrick Stewart's Captain Picard's famous monologue from First Contact, which I'm actually curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Does this work? Is it too cute, too self-aware? Is it awful? Is it great? I have a different opinion on it every time I watch it, but it's quite a moment, I feel like.
Yeah, I never had a problem with it. I always really liked it. I definitely think it's a meta Trek reference, and I think, I mean, the dichotomy between Picard and Quark is I think one of the things I like about it, because Quark I think kind of got that. I mean, he's a serious character, obviously, but he also has that playful kind of fun side that I think it really worked from a Ferengi angle. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that's kind of exactly my thought. It's two characters that could not be more diametrically opposed. Like, and the monologues are being given about completely different things. I mean, Picard's, obviously in this emotional turmoil with the Borg, and Quark's upset about, societal change, heading in the liberal direction, the progressive direction on Ferenginar, and wanting to push back. So taking this line reading, this monologue, and kind of repurposing it for very different reasons, for very different characters, is sort of a bold move, and certainly very self-aware.
Yeah, you said it well. They're diametrically opposed characters. I love that. Ross, what's your take on this Dogs of War reference? I love this one.
That's what makes it so perfect, that they are so completely different, and that must have been why they chose to do it. Like they must have absolutely known that was an absolutely so well-established line, that to make Quark say it in a different context, it just adds so much to the idea. It just throws so much Star Trek behind the monologue, not just the sentence he's saying, but we really know our stuff. We're really showing off. I think it's a great pick. I love it.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great pick. And like you said, it's like you couldn't have Riker deliver this line at any point in time, because the people were like, wait, what are they doing? But with Quark, you can get away with it.
I haven't raised prices in months. I've even been considering letting the Dabo girls keep most of their tips. I've gone soft.
I kind of like you better this way.
I don't. And I'm going to do something about it. This disease has got to be stopped before it destroys everything Ferenginar stands for. If Zek wants me to be Nagus, he's going to have to let me do things my way, or else I'll turn down the job.
Are you serious?
You bet I am.
But being Nagus will make you rich.
I don't care. I won't preside over the demise of Ferengi civilization. Not me. The line has to be drawn here. This far and no further.
I love it. Awesome pick to start. Ross, how about you, man? What's your round 5 pick? Okay,
so this is probably my least meta, but I really like this pick, so I'm just going to go with it anyway. Number 5, Babyface's alternate look oppresses Kirk. Hashtag Puppet Master. And I've chosen Balok the Puppet from the Corbomite maneuver as an example of in-universe practical special effects. At any point when you're watching Star Trek and you see a puppet, it might be a puppet of an alien, or now it might be an actual puppet. And I picked this because you really think about what is reality for the crew. How do they react to seeing exactly the same thing that we see? And, in the episode, they're scared and they're being terrified by him. And yet later on, he's just a dummy, and he's just, a head and shoulders on a stick, and it doesn't mean anything. And it's just what is real. They obviously were terrified, and now he's just a puppet. But for us, he was a puppet both times. Or was he? How do you think about it? It just bends my mind to think about how they came up with that idea. And was that an easy out, or was that something they really thought would be like an amazing twist?
Okay,
I really don't know.
Now it's racing through my mind because I've never thought about that in that way. I have to think no one ever even thought about this, but it's such a great point because it's a puppet, but it's the alien. It's on screen. Turns out it's a puppet. it would have been a puppet regardless because they would have used a puppet to film the alien. So it's like I'm confused. I'm thoroughly lost. That is
can't decide what's real anymore.
That is like a circular meta that I'm stuck in. Bill, what's your take on Baylock the puppet?
It was not on my. It never came up in my conversations and in my process here. But it really is. I think it's a great outside the box and something that many people probably wouldn't come up with. But it is. It's apt, and it is sort of a strange commentary on the practicality of the special effects and kind of using it to their advantage, using the limitations to the advantage of the show.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, the Baylock image, I think it's effective. I mean, that I remember that being a kid and it's scaring the living daylights out of me, and still kind of does.
The screen shimmers and the head just moves slightly to the left and the mouth opens up, and they're scared. On screen they're clearly being threatened, and the destruction of the Enterprise is there. And then later on, just a dummy. So,
I mean, that's one of the beauties of this pick too, that it's such an iconic image of 50 years of Star Trek. So definitely. I'm sure the production conversation went like this. So we have a puppet to be the alien, and then it turns out to be a puppet. It's great.
Mind blown. They'll never see that coming.
They'll never see it coming. Okay, here's my round 5 pick. I'm going with a twofer on my first pick, and I'm picking 2 original series creative legends who were referenced on screen throughout the Next Generation. So my 5 words in a hashtag: J's referenced in plain sight, hashtag meta tubes and shuttles. My episode is Suspicions from TNG Season 6, episode number 22. And my picks are Bob Justman and Matt Jeffries. So 2 of my favorite Trek original creators. So Jeffries Tubes to me is a pretty broad pick, something that we've seen throughout the series, and it's obviously awesome reference to the amazing design work of the original USS Enterprise from Matt Jeffries. And since we did a whole show on scenes in the Jeffries Tube, I'm going to focus on the Bob Justman reference for my pick. And for those who don't know who Bob Justman is, he was a producer in many different forms on TOS and TNG, and he's one of those original creatives that was just revered by fans and people like Mike and Denise Akuta and Doug Drexler and myself growing up. I think it's pretty fair to say that his attention to detail in the first 2 seasons of TOS really helped cement the show's kind of world building aspects, and the fact that it wasn't just a sci-fi show that could be dismissed. It was something, the decisions that he made really helped keep the show consistent and grounded. So really important work there. And he was also known for these crazy kind of subtle, funny memos with his dry wit that he would send, and he had this distinctive handlebar mustache as well. So the Justman shuttle was seen in the background of Gambit, and then it was seen and referenced in dialogue in Suspicion. So it was the shuttle that Beverly takes into the sun's atmosphere to test the metagenic shielding. And as an old school TOS fan, we've seen these shuttles many times, like the Galileo and these famous references to people, but we'd never really seen one like this, that it was referenced to a person who created Star Trek. And so when I just remember distinctly 25 years ago seeing them reference the Justman and thinking, wow, they named a shuttle after Bob Justman. That is so cool. I love that. So that's my number 5 pick, the Justman shuttle from Suspicions. Bill, what's your take on that one?
Love it. Didn't occur to me, but it's one of those things that's kind of right in your face. I mean, how many times over the 50 years really has Jeffries Tube been named? And it is such a self-aware meta reference to the production of the show. Love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Jeffries Tubes, to the extent that when we're out in space and we're constructing spaceships, what are they going to call the little corridors that connect all the compartments?
They better call them Jeffries Tubes. Great point.
If they don't call them Jeffries Tubes, I'll eat my hat. It's life imitates art, imitates life. It's that blurring of reality and Star Trek, and I absolutely love it. It's fantastic.
Man, if they don't call them Jeffrey's Tubes 100 years from now, they will. I'm so confident they will. I'm so confident.
Everybody who would work on design would be watching Star Trek, and they'll be thinking, well, I need to put a Jeffrey's Tube in here. They call it automatically. They wouldn't even think about it.
I love it. That's a great way to think about it. All right, let's go to round 4. Bill, what's your number 4 pick?
This is one I can't take complete credit for. This is one of the ones that sort of came out of my conversations with family, really. 5 words in a hashtag is Star Trek, : that doesn't count. A repetitive epic, hashtag the never-ending sacrifice. And it is from specifically The Wire, Deep Space Nine episode, and specifically the teaser of the episode. Garrick and Bashir are talking about Cardassian literature, one specific example of it, the never-ending sacrifice, this novel that's a chronicle of Cardassians living dedicated lives of service to the state, dying off so the next generation can come and do the same thing. And I feel like it's kind of maybe sort of a commentary on sort of the formula of Trek. And, Garrick's defense of it is very similar to, I think, how we would defend the existence of something that is as repetitive.
It's amazing. This is amazing.
Comforting. And Bashir's criticism of it, I think, speaks volumes as, this is the point in Star Trek's history from a production angle that Star Trek is sort of pushing back against the formula a little bit, doing Deep Space Nine, setting it on a space station, going a little darker, playing with serialization. So Bashir kind of speaking for the need for some change and to shake it up a little bit and not be so repetitive. I can feel like it's very representative of debates and conversations that people would have about things like Star Trek that have these long lives and new iterations that are trying to capture what came before and what made it special, but still trying to, push forward. And
wow, my mind is blown on this.
I absolutely love this pick.
I love this pick. I think it's totally legit. I am never going to look at it the same way again. And now my mind is racing thinking about everything you just said, Bill. I think it's exactly spot on. I think it's definitely a really subtle meta Trek reference to the never-ending saga of Trek and the hours and hours of television at that point.
The question I kept asking myself over the last few days, getting ready for this, is it's hard to say if it's intentional in any way. And if it's not intentional, is it really meta? Is it me? Is it, to be honest, my brother who kind of kicked off this whole idea? But it's putting our own into it and thinking about it, and it doesn't make a difference if it's completely accidental or if it's intentional. I don't know.
Yeah, I
don't know the answer.
I think it's growing there because if you've spotted it, it's only getting bigger now as well. The reference is bringing itself together because there is so much more Star Trek now, and it's diversifying in so many ways. If it wasn't intentional initially, you can certainly look back and paint it as a meta reference now. Even if you think about the novel, the Never-Ending Sacrifice is a novel now in its own right.
Well, that's a great point too. That would be
Cardassian literature exists. And, you can read it, and it's great.
Yeah, I feel comfortable going with it because it literally uses the dialogue, the next generation. And, it's like I said, it's at a point where the next generation's still on, and it's in production life, season 2 of Deep Space Nine, season 7 of TNG. And then using the terminology, the next generation just kind of takes over and does the same sort of thing. That, to me, I think, gives the agency to use something like this. I think it makes it, maybe it is intentional.
It's legit.
Yeah, no, either way, it is now for sure. I love this pick. Super outside the box. Deep cut pick. All right, Ross, how about you, man? What's your number 4 pick?
Okay, so you've gone from the super subtle. This is my most on the nose meta reference, but I was not going to cut it because I love it so much. Number 4, cragged Klingon cranium conundrum questioned. Hashtag forehead cannon. And I have, of course, picked that tiny scene in DS9 Trials and Tribulations whereby they look at the Klingons around them and they look at the Klingon in front of them and they say, what the hell's going on? At that point, books could have been written, and I'm sure message boards were filled up with speculation about any number of potential reasons for why Klingons went from smooth foreheads to those slight ridges to those huge bumpy things. And now, of course, the speculation could go on and on, the topic for another podcast probably. But in that moment, the issue was so completely in front of them, and they dealt with it so cleverly by having the crew pose the same question we, the viewer, posed, and then answering it with just, you know what, it doesn't really matter. We don't talk about it. Which is what we'd all done, which is what we all had done for years and years. And I've never forgotten how clever I thought that piece of writing was. And I think about it often. So I couldn't not pick it for this.
What'll it be, boys? And don't ask for Ractigino. If I have to say we don't carry that one more time.
Ractigino?
The Klingons.
Klingons?
Over there and over there.
Those are Klingons?
All right. You boys have had enough.
Mr. Worf?
They are Klingons. And it is a long story.
What happened? Some kind of genetic engineering?
A viral mutation?
We do not discuss it with outsiders.
Easy, lad.
It really was brilliant, and this was on my secondary systems as a pick. This exact scene, Bill. What's your take on Trials and Tribulations and the Klingon explanation?
It's definitely on my secondary systems too. It was very much in consideration. In true Star Trek fashion, I love that one of the guesses that's thrown out there is genetic mutation, which of course ends up kind of being exactly what it was in continuity and so it kind of works both ways. It is exactly what Ross said, and that's really what matters. It's it is what it is. But they even kind of oddly, weirdly backdoor made it work even on that level too. So love it.
Yeah, I love it too. And I also love in this scene, people kind of forget about when they mistake the security guard for Kirk. I just think that that's also that's kind of meta in a way too. I don't know how, but I just
isn't that Shatner's stunt double?
It sure looked like it. I mean, it sure looked like him. So
it definitely is meta.
Yeah, everything made sense. So all right, this is good because that's kind of a nitpicking solution, and my round 4 pick is going to be focused on that as well. So Bill's was super subtle, Ross's was direct, mine is a little bit repetitive. My next pick I knew was going to be a part of my list. I've referenced this episode a few times recently on TrekRanks, and I'm going to do it again because I'm going to be ranting a little bit about nitpicking. So here we go, 5 words and a hashtag. The technical details don't matter. Hashtag Meta Neelix shuts down nitpickers. And it's the episode The Haunting of Deck 12 from Voyager, written by Mike Sussman with credits to Kenneth Biller and Brian Fuller too. And I know for a fact that in the writer's room for this episode, they put together these scenes to set it up just to take a dig at all the nitpicking and reference that they had to put up with it online, just beginning at that point. It was just beginning to be message boards and things like that. So again, the setup of this episode is that Neelix is telling the Borg kids a story to keep them occupied. And twice the kids, and really specifically it was Icheb, basically take the role of the annoying Star Trek nitpicking fans by complaining about the way he's telling the story. So Icheb says, "You're not remembering this correctly." And Neelix says, "I beg your pardon? The Bussard collectors don't produce Nadion emissions." And Neelix perfectly says, "Well, the technical details don't matter. What's important is that Voyager's presence was destabilizing the nebula. That's the story we're telling. Who cares about the details?" It's just not clever when you're constantly saying things like Icheb here about these little technical details about these amazing Star Trek stories.
Report.
The nebula's beginning to destabilize.
Cause?
I'm not sure. It could have something to do with the Nadion emissions being produced by the Bussard collectors.
You're not remembering correctly.
I beg your pardon?
The Bussard collectors don't produce Nadion emissions.
Well, the technical details don't matter. What's important is that Voyager's presence was destabilizing the nebula, and the crew wasn't interested in taking any chances.
7 of 9 to the bridge. Bridge acknowledged.
But of course, there was no answer.
Why didn't she remodulate her neural transceiver, send a message that way?
That's an interesting question. You'll have to ask her.
Stop interrupting.
Hey, I know, everybody, we know that Ro and Geordi should have fallen through the decks in the next phase. We know that. You're not being clever when you point that out. Who cares? It's a great story. Oh, man. And then when Scotty brings his dying nephew up to the bridge in the Wrath of Khan, we know it makes no sense. Who cares? You're not being clever when you point that out. All right. And then in the second reference, because there's two of these, it's so great. So Neelix says that there was no answer when Seven was in danger trying to contact the bridge. And Hijab says, why didn't she remodulate her neural transceiver and send a message that way? And Neelix says, that's an interesting question. You'll have to ask her. And I love this because this is the lamest of nitpicking. Hey, why didn't Spock and number one just beam out of the turbo lift in the short track Q&A? You know why? Because the wonderful, thoughtful writer of this episode decided to not waste your time by including an unnecessary extraneous line about the transporters currently being in a diagnostic cycle. Right? You just don't need that. They're telling the story. Stop nitpicking this stuff apart. You're just being Icheb. You're ruining Neelix's awesome story. And I'm done ranting. I promise I won't pick this episode again for at least 6 months. All right. Bill, what's your take on the haunting of Deck 12 and Neelix shutting down the nitpickers?
For the first time in my life, I want to end this as soon as we're done and put on the haunting on Deck 12. I'm very eager to watch it with that lens on. I love it. I love it because it's so true. It is exactly, you're watching in real time in the universe of the show the conversations that you see on Twitter and on other podcasts and YouTube channels and all this that people use a lot of oxygen, and I'm sure they have fun, and it's satisfying to them and to many people, but it's not an approach that I tend to subscribe to, and there is a definite satisfaction in looking at the haunting on Deck 12 from that angle.
And 20 years removed from this episode, it's even more apropos. Ross, what's your take on this pick?
I mean, it's not even, it's part of the story, but it really is the writers speaking directly to the audience, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely.
It doesn't matter that this is on. This is us telling you, the viewer, this is what we think about the stuff that happens in the real world. It's great. It's perfect. I didn't think of this at all, but I absolutely love it.
Yeah. Why didn't she remodulate her neural transceiver? Oh, man. I've seen that so many times on Twitter. Okay, I'm moving on. Sorry, everybody. Please keep listening. I apologize. Okay, we're going to the soup round. Bill, what is your round 3 pick?
5 words and a hashtag. The most endearing Hallmark ad ever. Hashtag Voyager Christmas. It's from Voyager Season 2, Death Wish. Voyager being hidden in a Christmas tree, essentially as an ornament at a time. It even still applies.
I did not think of this one.
Really?
I did not. This is amazing. This is such a good pick.
As somebody who grew up during the Christmas season staring at a Christmas tree full of Star Trek ornaments, it definitely hit home and continues to hit home. We still have a Christmas tree that is full of Star Trek ornaments every year. And it's as self-aware as it gets. I believe there were, around this time, if I pop in an old VHS tape in my closet from the recording of that episode as it aired, one of the commercials that you'll find, I'm sure, around the Christmas time season of episodes is probably a commercial for Star Trek Hallmark ornaments from the mid '90s. So it really is. It's like the most inventive form of product placement that's directly beneficial to the show, and it somehow works because it's Q and it's clever, and I love it.
It's a brilliant pick. I'm so glad you picked it. Otherwise, this would have been the show that we didn't reference the Voyager Christmas ornament. Ross, what's your take on this pick from Death Wish? So good. I can't believe I didn't think of it.
It's a lovely deck. Is that one where Q actually looks directly down the view screen as well?
Yes.
I mean, that's him just looking at the audience, isn't it? Just like, we're doing it. This is happening. We're at Christmas. Just enjoy it. It's a wonderful pick. It's a really cheerful pick. I love it.
Yeah, that's a great one, and it really is just an ad for Hallmark. Pretty fantastic. All right, Ross, what's your soup round pick?
Okay, number 3, Planet Hell and Planet X. Hashtag set in stone. I have picked Voyager Bride of Chaotica, And it's not because it's essentially a fan letter to like Flash Gordon
Yes.
sci-fi, but in the very beginning, in the opener, there's a snippet of dialogue whereby Harry complains that the sets all look the same. Weren't we here before? Is this Planet X? Or is it the mines of Mercury? And Paris just comes back and just says, God, sets were expensive back then. You know, they just reuse the same things. That's fine. Use your imagination and let's go down the mines and face the Doom Troopers or whatever they're called. And it was just so nice that they had this snippet of dialogue references the real world conditions in which Star Trek series were being filmed, because you see the Vasquez cliffs. You recognize them. You see them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You recognize the deserts. You see the cave sets. And you know what? It's because it's very expensive to make lots of science fiction TV shows.
Yep.
And so they reuse the sets. So I really like that as we know. You just use your imagination, it'll all be fine.
Well, we just did top 5 scenes in a cave. So this pick is amazing. I did not think of this one either, but you could have picked Bride of Chaotica just on its own.
You could have.
That. Mm-hmm. But that is such a great straight up meta Trek reference inside that episode when they're talking about the sets, the planet sets all looking alike.
Let's go. I'm right behind you. Planet X looks kind of familiar. What was the last place we went to? Mines of Mercury. They're identical. Sets were expensive. At least there's no erupting volcano this time. Ah, behold, the Fortress of Doom. And how are we supposed to get up there? I told you, the underground caverns. Right.
That is awesome. What a great pick. Bill, what's your take on this one?
It never occurred to me either, but I'm so glad you picked it because it's so apt. It's so true. And it's such a thing that even back then, I remember being on like Star Trek message boards and people just railing on, particularly it's a couple of years later, but early Enterprise, just yet another episode in the cave. What the heck? You know, fans just going on and on about the caves over and over again. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's such a smart pick.
Yeah, that is a great one. Yes, ma'am. His Army of Evil.
Yes.
Okay.
The language, I just love the language of it.
Good.
All the view screen is the imagizer, the phaser is the ray gun. We're not Terrans, we're Earthlings.
Yeah.
But I mean, have we ever been called Terrans? Don't they call us humans? That was what I thought about for a long time as well. the science fiction language.
That's perfect. All right. I didn't think this pick was going to make my list, but in the end, I just couldn't keep it off. So made it my soup round pick. My 5 words and a hashtag: to seek out new life, hashtag, or new trees. And it is Enterprise, the episode Strange New World, season 1, episode 4. It is Porthos bounding out of the shuttle pod to go urinate on a tree. I think everyone knows I'm a huge animal lover, and I love this moment from Enterprise. It's a great episode to begin with, but it's also one of those strong early Enterprise entries where you really get the kind of sense of awe and wonder of the crew exploring. And this is the first time you see them taking a shuttle pod down to a planet. It lands. It's beautiful. It's really cool moment. They open the hatch, and here comes Porthos running out, and Trip says, "Where no dog has gone before." And I love that moment. It was smart. It was meta. It didn't take me out of it. It's just smart. And, they referenced, 2 episodes before, they showed the Zefram Cochrane speech where he actually said Strange New Worlds and seek out new life. So it made sense from an in-universe and out-of-universe. And yeah, I love that. It is a great low angle of Porthos, really well shot. Just a great moment where no dog has gone before.
Where no dog has gone before.
I almost forgot what fresh air smells like.
Bill, what's your take on that scene?
I was just thinking about that low angle shot of Porthos running. It comes immediately to mind. And that episode, particularly the front end of that episode, really is Enterprise kind of capitalizing on its premise about as well as it maybe ever did. Those scenes do feel like, they really were capturing the awe and wonder of being out there exploring for the first time. And that that really does kind of embody it. And it sets it apart as something that you wouldn't have seen in other Trek. It was completely new. It was a whole new, fun little aside the dynamic that really was setting Enterprise apart. And not the last time that Porthos urinates on a tree, and
that's right.
The next time causes more headaches. The next time,
diplomatic incident.
That's true. They reference that again in A Night in Sick Bay. Ross, what's your take on Strange New World and Porthos?
What I love about these little snippets where they use like the opening dialogue in it is that you could probably piece together the opening dialogue from snippets of the TV shows over the course of the year, because it's so carefully thrown in. Every now and then somebody thinks now's the time, we're going to just use that episode or use that term or change it just slightly. And I absolutely love that they think to do this and that they are so invested in the Star Trekness of it all that they want to make sure that we know that they know. It's right there. It's such a great thing. And again, you can imagine in the future on other planets, this is what people will say where no horse has gone before, where no sheep has gone before. They're going to say it. It's just a matter of waiting for it to happen.
Yeah, I love that too. There probably is a smash cut you could do of all the different references that fill out the intro. That's cool. Okay, let's go to round 2. Bill, what's your number 2 pick?
This is another one that came out of conversations with my dad specifically. But 5 words in a hashtag: wannabe Tuvok meets real Tuvok. Hashtag your logic is flawed. And you can kind of go with the whole episode with Live Fast and Prosper from Voyager season 6 with these essentially cosplaying wannabe guys who cloak themselves in the fandom and the good of the thing that they love, or the thing that they need, without necessarily exuding the positive traits of what they love. That's certainly something that I think we see all too often these days, and maybe it's become even more prescient. And that moment specifically, I'm going with the guy pretending to be Tuvok running into actual Tuvok and being starstruck and standing there stunned for a second, then trying to logic his way out of what's going to happen. And Tuvok, of course, your logic is flawed and quickly dispenses with him, stuns him, is a very satisfying moment for me. And it's become more satisfying because, like I said, there are cosplaying Star Trek folks out there who are not necessarily doing it for all the right reasons. And it's,
This pick is fantastic. I didn't think of this one either, even though it's kind of, the whole episode is so meta, and just the cosplay element of it is the most meta thing. And the writers, when they make the combat as big as you can on their uniform.
Yeah, exactly.
It's classic. Ross, what's your take on Live Fast and Prosper?
I did think of this just because of the people trying to emulate Starfleet, but not capturing it, not getting there at all. And the gigantic badges, it is hilarious. But I can't sum up better than Bill did. That moment with Tuvok is absolutely hilarious. When he tries to use the logic, oh my God, it's so funny. It's very good.
Yeah, Tuvok v. Tuvok is superb. I love this pick.
I can actually relate to it real quick. I'm not a frequent convention goer these days. I haven't been to a convention in a long time, but I did for a lot of years as a really young kid. And I specifically remember I was probably 4 or 5, and my mom walking me to a restroom and walking essentially directly into Walter Koenig, and my reaction to seeing Walter Koenig standing right in front of me was very similar to this fake Tuvok looking at Tuvok. So I can actually relate to that starstruck, like, holy cow, who am I looking at here?
I think we can all relate to that at some point. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. All right, Ross, what's your number 2 pick?
Okay, number 2 pick. This is just a little one. Finale reference: Reed leaves behind. Hashtag the big goodbye. I have, again, this is the second time I picked this episode. Enterprise, season 4, episode 22. These are the Voyagers.
Yes.
Trip and Reed are taking a tour around the engine room, and they're walking about reminiscing. And Reed is, he's disappointed. Trip is disappointed that things are coming to an end. Reed utters the immortal line, All Good Things.
Oh, that's
thusly name dropping the season finale from The Next Generation, which is the series which is currently invading his series finale.
Yeah.
It's like meta inside interference. And it's so quickly done, and it's All Good Things is something that people do say. You do throw that line out when things are coming to an end, and he throws it out casually there. But it's so placed in that scene for you to know that he knows that All Good Things is the season finale of The Next Generation, because we have written it this way. It's just really tiny and really quick, but it is completely meta, and it fit this list just perfectly.
It's been a hell of a run, Malcolm. I never thought it would come to an end.
All Good Things. Captain thinks there'll be another Enterprise before too long.
I imagine.
Won't be the same.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's an emotional pick. I really like that one. I would never would have thought of that one, but that is a great moment. Just even without the line, just them kind of saying goodbye in a way in that scene. Now I want to rewatch that one after this is done.
I feel like I'm on a personal mission to rehabilitate this episode. Two Trek ranks, two picks for this episode.
Wait, what shape did you pick from it again? I'm trying to remember.
I picked the grid, the holodeck grid, because this is the last time we have seen.
You did the holodeck grid shape, and you put it in this episode. That was brilliant. Okay, Bill, what's your take on These Are the Voyages and this final Reed and Trip moment?
I love it. I gave some thought to These Are the Voyages as a possibility for sure, and it's an episode that I definitely struggle with. There are things about it that I have a hard time swallowing, but there are these little moments throughout, like that scene specifically, that really do kind of resonate, and it capitalizes on the idea of the much maligned at the time Valentine to the fans, sort of recognizing the end of an era kind of thing. I think that's one of the moments where that really kind of sings and works, and I love it. I think it's a great pick in an episode that gets, lumped in as like a total disaster, but there are these things in it that are kind of worthwhile.
Well, in some ways, you can go, the title is meta. And so we've had Strange New Worlds as a title, and These Are the Voyages as a title. And Live Fast and Prosper, which is almost meta. Okay, let's go to my round 2 pick. This is a deep cut pick incoming. I thought about this one just a while ago, doing some research for another episode. And my 5 words in a hashtag: 1950s Westerns, Shane versus Searchers. Hashtag meta movies with Jimmy Darren. And the episode is It's Only a Paper Moon from Deep Space Nine, Season 7, Episode 10. It's really just a quick reference in a scene with Vic and Nog when they're in Vic's apartment and they're catching up, and Nog's been watching Shane, and he's pretty annoyed that Shane got shot in one scene, and then he's totally fine in the next scene. But my pick is not Shane, because that doesn't have a meta tie-in to Trek. So at the end of the discussion, Nog kind of says, exasperated, that I like the Searchers better. And Vic says, yeah, who doesn't? And so I love The Searchers. It's a classic old 50s Western. It's one of the best Westerns I saw when I was a kid. And I always remember this moment because guess who was the star of The Searchers? It was John Wayne, but the number 2 on the call sheet was none other than the original Captain Pike, Jeffrey Hunter. And I always thought when this aired that was a kind of a cool, totally done on purpose selection, because Ronald D. Moore wrote this, so I'm not sure if he did that consciously, but I think it's really the only like reference in Trek of like a previous pop culture work that really has a Trek actor in it that's really well known for it, because that's Jeffrey Hunter's really well known for the Searchers in terms of those circles, more so than he is Captain Pike. And it's, for me, it's like if they referenced T.J. Hooker in Star Trek. That's how prominent it was when they did. I was like, oh, that's Jeffrey Hunter. So, and you could also pick Jimmy Darren, because he was basically part of the Rat Pack as well with with Frank and Sammy. Not technically, but he hung with those guys. So my pick is The Searcher, starring Jeffrey Hunter. Super meta deep cut pick. Bill, any thoughts on this one?
Super deep cut. Never would have occurred to me, but it's 100% true. I think you're right. I think it is the only time they ever reference anything that a Star Trek alum was so,
right,
defined by. Yeah, exactly. And it's cute on that level, but it's perfectly done. It's perfectly modulated for the episode. Such a darn good episode, top to bottom. But that dialogue is really great, and the way they work Shane into it, and I love that little exchange at the end that you mentioned. I like Searchers better, and Vic says, "Who doesn't?" That's kind of true.
Yeah,
it's a perfectly pitched
Vic's reference. Yeah, who doesn't? It's like perfect Vic moment.
I like the Searchers better.
Yeah, who doesn't? Oh, son of a gun. I gotta get ready for the show.
Show? I thought we were hanging in.
Well, hanging out, and we are, except I have a gig to do.
Ross, what's your take on this one?
You've got to be super connected to bring this as a reference together, because I only knew this having really researched Only a Paper Moon not that long ago for Snap Trek, and going down like a Wikipedia tunnel of all the details of everything that was happening. And at the time, I didn't know this, but I knew it as you said it, because I'd recently read it. But I think it's so deep, and it's so wonderful, and it just makes you. I mean, I've never watched The Searchers. No, maybe I'm going to have to now.
Oh,
maybe
you
I'm going to
should.
have to watch something that's not Star Trek.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, Bill, you would probably know this. I'm pretty sure it's on AFI's top 100.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's. I think it might even be like in the top 20. It's really good. So
all-time classic.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it's like highlighted as like the best Western ever, pretty much.
Yeah, so pretty often.
It takes a lot for me to not watch an episode of Star Trek. So
yeah, likewise. And it's directed by John Ford, so it's obviously a big one. Yeah. Okay, and by the way, I think it's a little more. This is a little more relevant now that Captain Pike's so part of the zeitgeist the last couple of years. So even cooler. Okay, let's go to our round one picks. Bill, what's your number one meta Trek reference?
5 words and a hashtag. Movie promo photo becomes canon. Hashtag 50th anniversary tribute. Star Trek Beyond. The use of the Star Trek 5 promo photo of the crew. I feel like this could have been really heavy-handed, really shoehorned in as a look at us. We're doing a tribute for the 50th anniversary. But what I love about it so much, and why it's kind of stuck with me in the years since the movie's come out, is that it's perfectly pitched. Again, it's they don't use just a photo of the crew from the original series and just kind of do it to do it. It's specifically chosen. I think they use a photo from Star Trek 5 when these people are of age and have stuck together, and it's used in a way to close up Spock's arc in the movie of deciding where his place in the universe is and where he's best served and where he needs to go and where he belongs at the end of the day. And this photo tells Spock everything he needs to know, that these people stick together and this is his family and this is where he belongs. And I think the fact that it operates on both of those levels at the same time is a touching tribute to Nimoy and the crew and the people we've lost from that original crew for the 50th anniversary, but also really serving the story of Beyond and tying up that movie in a really neat way is Star Trek meta at its best.
Wow. Yeah, it's a brilliant pick. Such a powerful moment. And the fact that you found out later, I don't think I realized it at the time until we heard about it and read about it later, that it was the Star Trek 5 promotional photo that was like the perfect one to use. It was
perfect.
It's kind of a crazy thing that I read one report where they did the photo as like a last second thing. Like, oh, let's just capture this really quick.
Let's do it. Yeah.
And for it to survive into Trek and be part of Trek, wow, that pick is awesome. And I'm emotional thinking about it because I love that movie and I love that scene. That is a fantastic pick. Ross, what's your take on Beyond and the use of that TOS photo?
This specific scene was a very tough cut for me in this top 5 list. I really thought about this very hard. I absolutely... I love the picture they choose, and I recognized it fairly quickly on watching it. I was like, that's a great shot, and they've used it. But what I really liked was the fact that it acknowledges Nimoy's passing, and it does it in universe, and it really just, you know, he was such. I mean, he's just massive, isn't he? He's so huge, such a character. He embodies Star Trek in a way which very few other characters do or could, and it was perfect that they recognized it. It works in the story. I absolutely loved it, and I was very close to having it in my top 5. So great pick.
That's awesome that you thought of it too. Real amazing pick. I'm so moved by that pick. I love it. My pick is not moving, by the way. So Ross, let's hear yours before we get to mine. What's your number one meta Trek reference?
Okay, this for me is the most outstanding example of the writers talking directly to the audience and acknowledging that we know you. Number one pick, the Doctor's name in lights, #Fan Komar the Opera. And I have picked Voyager Virtuoso, the explanation of fanaticism between Janeway and Seven, fan mail, interested celebrity, personal inquiries. Kate Mulgrew she should just looked at the camera and a massive wink, because she's obviously talking about us. And I'm not ashamed to admit that I recognize myself just a little bit in some of that description. And I thought it was hilarious, and it has stuck with me for a very long time, that particular moment, that it's so knowing. We all know. Everybody knows. You're a Star Trek fan. We write Star Trek. We know this is for you. We know you're going to listen to this. It's just a hilarious, very much written for the audience moment, and I really enjoyed it.
It really is. I did consider this one, so it was on my secondary systems, but it is really on the nose, and those Voyager writers, they really took their they really went direct at the fan base, I think, on a few of those things, because I wonder who wrote that one. That was really spot on, and literally it's not Captain Janeway. That's Kate Mulgrew.
That's Kate Mulgrew
speaking directly to you. Bill, what's your take on Virtuosos and this the fan mail?
It's very meta. It's definitely aimed directly at us. Very self-aware, and it's a great pick. It didn't occur to me. I don't know why it didn't. It strikes me that Voyager is very much a very active presence on these lists. So maybe it says something about that show and the way that those writers sort of operated, that they were willing to play in that territory, that meta territory. Yeah, I love it. And Jim, where does Virtuoso sit on TrekRanks?
I'm pretty sure it's second to last. it's right there with author.
Even with the clown suit. What?
I mean, we don't talk about the things we don't like on TrekRanks, but I don't like the premise and the setup of this episode. It's just it's too much of a sitcom setup for me. So.
The sitcom setup, I mean, it is a little bit meh. But what I like about this episode is the discussion of the Doctor's rights and what it is that he does not have that other members of the crew might have if they were choosing to leave.
Yeah, but not to get into it. See, I didn't like that because for me, him resigning would be just like if Janeway resigned. The crew would have reacted the exact same way. They would say, "What are you talking about? You're our captain. You can't just leave us here." They would have said the exact. So it wasn't about his rights. Anyway,
agree to disagree.
Okay, all right, okay, all right. We are going to move on from author and Virtuoso are about the two biggest hot buttons for me in Trek history. So.
I had no idea it was so low on TrekRanks, though.
Okay, let's go to my round one pick. We are going to lighten the mood with my number one pick. 5 words and a hashtag. It doesn't make any sense. Hashtag Rom's Meta Mirror Universe Deconstruction. And it is The Emperor's New Cloak, Deep Space Nine, Season 7, Episode 12. And people really don't love this episode too much. And I can see why. I certainly don't dislike it. But as the last 24th Century Mirror Universe episode, it holds a special place in my heart because of Rom's running commentary through the whole episode on the mirror universe and the fact that it doesn't make any sense. And There's so many quotes from him, like, over here, everything's alternate. Within a minute later, he's like, their O'Brien is as nice as our O'Brien. None of it makes any sense. It's all very confusing.
Brother, I just realized something.
This should be good.
This is supposed to be an alternate universe, but their Captain O'Brien seems as nice as our Chief O'Brien. So? Don't you see? It doesn't make any sense. It's not alternate.
Go back to sleep, Ron.
Right. But it's all very confusing.
Yeah, there's just a million good moments where you're supposed to be the good guys, and his analysis of Brunt being a nice guy and feeding him tube grubs, but their Brunt would have poisoned the tube grubs, and none of it makes any sense. And I just love every moment of Rom in this episode talking about the mirror universe, and then a little bit bonus meta, them Quark and Rom stealing a cloaking device that's cloaked. So they're carrying it through. I feel like that's when they're pretending to carry the cloak.
Now lift!
It's heavy.
Oh, I noticed. Watch the steps.
I see them, brother. I told you cloaking the cloaking device was a good idea.
Brilliant. But could you have done something about its weight?
Nope. But if it makes you feel any better, the cloaking device on the Defiant is a lot heavier.
Tell it to my hernia.
All right, so I have Rom and his meta mirror universe deconstruction. Bill, what's your take on the Emperor's New Cloak?
And not an episode that comes to mind for me very often, but you're so right. It's so you can definitely feel that it was almost like directly transplanting the writers, kind of trying to make sense of it as they were going and writing it, and putting that stuff into Rom. And Rom's such the perfect vessel to put that stuff into, and Rom's the perfect character to have walking around, kind of trying to make it make sense in the most inappropriate moments that you can have. It's a really great pick.
Yeah, Rom trying to make sense of it is high comedy. Ross, what's your take on this one?
I mean, it's very funny, and you do an excellent ROM, so there might be a sideline for your conventions in the future. It is very good, isn't it? And it just sort of, it comes back to what we've said all the way through. The writers who write this, they know Star Trek, and they are trying to write something entertaining, which makes sense, and you're going to enjoy, but at some level, they know that lots of this stuff can't possibly really make sense. But you don't have to worry too much about it.
Yep, exactly.
It doesn't make sense. Everything you think of, we already thought of, but we weren't worried about it.
Oh, you couldn't say it any better than that. Everything you're thinking of, we've already thought of, and we're just not worried about it. This is the Ira Stephen Bear and Hans Beimler script, and LeVar Burton directed it. So no wonder they call it the alternate universe. Right. Okay, let's rattle off some secondary systems picks. Bill, what do you got?
The two that I would throw out there are more broad, less specific, like moments. I really had a hard time cutting the whole episode of Muse. I feel like that it's almost impossible to isolate a specific moment there. But the way it comments on, different writers have kind of defined it differently. You hear Patrick Stewart talk about doing Star Trek being, tapping into the Shakespearean qualities of it and the cadence of the dialogue. And, Shatner's talked about like the mythological, current that kind of runs through it being something that attracts people. And I've heard Brian Braga describe it as a period piece that happens to be set in the future. Muse kind of plays with all of those ideas and
agreed.
It's all about the storytelling of Star Trek, and I love that.
I'll jump in and say that I had it on my list too, and I didn't include it. And there's two other episodes that were similar for me, like with TNG's emergence because of the consciousness of the Enterprise emerging.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of a meta statement. And then The Void, which is obviously just a deconstruction of Starfleet and the Star Trek in 45 minutes. So I didn't pick any of those three because they were all kind of they were kind of in universe, but they're also kind of more about the show inside the show than the show outside the show being inside the show. But
the other thing,
those are great picks. So yeah, what else do you have?
The last one that I had a hard time cutting was Terry Farrell's performance in Trials and Tribulations, basically being a stand-in for the fan.
Yes.
Her reaction to everything she sees, everything she encounters is very much a conscious, and I believe they talk about that in like bonus features of documenting the making of that episode, sort of writing Dax as the character who can most logically fill that gap, being somebody who's lived through it and has memory of these times and these people. So I love the way Terry Farrell kind of exudes, the fan spirit, walking through that episode. I think that's very self-aware and kind of meta. But again, it's very broad and it's very kind of, you can twist it into is it really meta or is it just kind of a in-universe kind of cute self-referential thing? But I could go either way on it.
That one's definitely meta. That's a great pick that I didn't have on my long list. I love that pick. Okay, Ross, how about you, man? What else did you have on your secondary systems?
I had. I really thought a lot about Far Beyond the Stars, and I know it's a much loved episode and well picked. But as a meta idea, as Deep Space Nine being written as a pulp novel within the episode of Deep Space Nine, I really like that sort of reflection of where what science fiction is and how it's written and what it means to people. I really enjoyed that, but I felt like it was such a big idea. I didn't want to. I wanted to pick a smaller moment. I thought a lot about where the scenes whereby they watch other episodes of Star Trek. So
the menagerie.
That's the most obvious example.
Yes, I had that on my list.
Sat down watching the cage. It's very meta, and they do a couple. I'm thinking the Search for Spock. They look back at.
The beginning of the Search for Spock. They're definitely watching Star Trek. Yeah,
precisely, and I really liked those little bits. There were two sort of extra episode aspects I enjoyed. So I thought about the Enterprise credits for Amira Darkly, the Mirror Universe credits, which is recognizing we're making a different TV show today.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the show you're expecting. It's going to be totally different. I like that. And then similarly, from Discovery, we haven't talked about Discovery really.
No,
I think it's, if memory serves, the previously on Star Trek aspect, which is done with the old school Captain Pike, and it's sort of given it like a 60s flair vibe. It's really quick cut, and then it just cuts to the normal episodes. I really thought that was a clever use of we love Star Trek, we know Star Trek, here's the history, here's today, we're mashing them together, it's going to work. And I thought if memory serves was perfect.
That's literally the most meta you can get. They literally opened the series, the show with that meta reference to the 60s. That's a great shout out. I'm glad you thought of that.
One thing real quick.
Yep.
Now, one little offshoot from one of the ones you just mentioned, the Far Beyond the Stars, that I didn't think of until you just said it, is, if memory serves, the cover of the Pulp magazine at one point, Benny Russell's picking it up on the newsstand, is the cover is a matte painting from TOS.
Yes,
I believe it's one of the original like season 1 Planet matte paintings. So that's a neat little one. And then your choice of the crew sort of watching the cage and the menagerie, an offshoot of that I did actually cut, that I was thinking of, is episodes like Arena, the Savage Curtain, where you have the bridge crew sort of watching Kirk and Spock, in the case of like the Savage Curtain, fighting on a planet and sort of watching the episode play out the way we are. Is something that
I thought a Balance of Terror as well, where they zone in and they're watching another crew on another bridge doing their job, which I thought was great. My last one, which I really cut out at the very last minute. This was going to be my super round pick. It was so I wrote a 5 words and a hashtag for it, which I'll give you. They're not just enjoying him. Hashtag Sonata only upsets prophets. And it's Varani at the very beginning of the Deep Space Nine episode Sanctuary is playing the Deep Space Nine episode theme tune on his whatever instrument that is. And I recognize, as soon as I watched the episode, I recognized instantly that he was playing it. And I really enjoyed that. And that made me think about other episodes where the theme was used. Mm-hmm. And I thought about the original series, The Conscience of the King.
They do it there too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they do it there too.
The cocktail party.
Well, an extra meta, that character in Sanctuary was played by William Shallert, who played Niels Barris from the Trials and from the Trouble of Tribbles, aka Trials and Tribulations. It's all meta. I love those references, and I'm pretty sure that's a great one. I should have thought of that. The Far Beyond the Stars cover art from the magazine. I can't remember if it was Delta Vega or Janus 6 from Devil in the Dark, but I think it was. Definitely the map painting. Brilliant.
The Starbase in the Menagerie,
maybe it was Starbase 13.
Yeah, I can picture it in my head. I'm just trying to connect.
All right, we're nerds. Trying to think. Okay. Those are awesome, the secondary systems. Let me rattle off a few. My toughest cut. I can't believe it hasn't come up yet. I really thought it would get picked. That's why I didn't pick it. I rarely do that, but so I picked the Searchers instead. It is Mestral from Carbon Creek saying "I Love Lucy" is on tonight. That is as meta, literally as meta as it gets, because Lucy is what gave us Star Trek.
Yeah, so true.
Lou. So I'll rattle off a few more. I've got Bashir being beat up for his holosuite programs. It's only a paper moon when it's not super really meta, but it's kind of meta, and I just love that moment. I have Kirk and Spock watching Star Trek on TV in the Menagerie. I love that. I've got the big green space hand from Star Trek Beyond when Simon Pegg references that from Who Mourns for Adonai. The Jake Sisko failing to explain why money doesn't exist in the Federation in the cards, when he's like trying to tell Nog why he doesn't need money, even though he does need money. And that's a great moment. Yep. Same episode, Nog talking about lions, geigers, and bears is definitely a meta line. And then there's a great moment in Facets where Quark is talking to Jake and Nog, and basically Quark is like saying, they're using Jake as a good example for something, and Nog says, "Uncle, he wants to be a writer. There's no profit in that." And that sounds like something a poor Star Trek writers room writer would write into an episode. My special shout out, and we said that we're not going to choose the infamous Zefram Cochrane line about astronauts on some kind of Star Trek, but before that line there was the amazing line from Q in All Good Things. It's time to put an end to your trek through the stars. So that was kind of the first reference to Star Trek in writing. So yeah, lots of amazing meta moments. I'm sure there's some that we've missed as well. But yeah, I knew this would be a really interesting topic and unearth some deep cut picks with you guys. So I love it. But let's get into our regeneration cycle now and start. We'll go through some stats and do a quick recap of our picks.
Computer, activate regeneration cycle. Alcoves beta and gamma.
All right, Bill, why don't you recap your top 5 meta Trek references?
My number 5 was Quark echoing Picard's monologue from First Contact in The Dogs of War. My number 4 was the repetitive epic, The Never-Ending Sacrifice discussion between Bashir and Garrick in The Wire. My number 3 was Voyager hanging in the Christmas tree, hiding from Q in Death Wish. My number 2 was lame cosplayer Tuvok meeting actual Tuvok in Live Fast and Prosper. And my number 1 was the photo from Star Trek V, the promo photo being used in Star Trek Beyond.
I love that list. You had 2 from Deep Space Nine, 2 from Voyager, and 1 from the Kelvin timeline. I love when the Kelvin timeline gets repped. Ross, how about you recap your 5 picks?
So my number 5 was Balok the Puppet from the Corbomite Maneuver. My number 4 was the discussion about what happened to Klingon foreheads in DS9's Trials and Tribulations. My number 3 is Voyager Bride of Chaotica, where Tom and Harry discuss the use of sets and how expensive they are. My number 2 is the conversation between Reed and Trip, where he references the All Good Things TNG finale in Enterprise, These Are the Voyages. And my number 1 is the discussion between Janeway and Seven about fan mail, fans, and just fandom generally in Voyager's Virtuoso.
Amazing. Love that list. You had, let's see, you had one from TOS, Deep Space Nine, and Enterprise, and then two from Voyager. Okay, and then my top 5 picks, my number 5 pick was the Justman Shuttle and Jeffries tubes from TOS, but in the TNG episode Suspicions. My number 4 pick, The Haunting of Deck 12, Neelix deconstructs nitpicking from Voyager. My number 3 pick was Strange New Worlds from Enterprise, where no dog has gone before. My number 2 pick from It's Only a Paper Moon in Deep Space Nine, the reference to The Searchers, starring Jeffrey Hunter of The Cage and the original Captain Pike. And my number 1 pick was from Deep Space Nine, The Emperor's New Cloak, Rom's meta deconstruction of the Mirror Universe. Okay, so let's. Oh, I had 2 from Deep Space Nine and 1 each from TNG, Voyager, and Enterprise. So we had no duplicates, which does not surprise me too much. We had a pretty good representation. So there was no Discovery picks, but I love that If Memory Serves pick. If I had thought of that, I would have picked that for sure in Ross's secondary systems. So the breakdown was 1 each from TOS, TNG, and the Kelvin timeline, and then 2 from Enterprise, and Deep Space Nine and Voyager both had 5 picks. So I think the further we get into Trek, there's a little more meta references going on at that point with the writers, which is pretty cool. Okay, fantastic recap. As we do every week, though, we have entered a temporal causality loop. So before we can depart, it's time to hear from you.
The Enterprise has been caught up in a temporal causality loop, and I suspect that something similar may have happened to you.
And for this week's temporal causality loop, we're going to go back to episode 67 and our top 5 sneaky good episodes. I love that topic. We got a ton of great feedback for that one. Quite a few people sent over lists with, I think, like 1 episode from each series. And Bill, if I'm correct, I think you were the one that started that trend.
Oh, I started it.
I think, yeah, you're pretty sure you were the first one. Everyone kind of followed suit. So I'm going to rattle off some of my favorite lists from a few of the folks who sent over 1 episode per series. So first up, we have Terry, who is at Tell the Trekkie, battling trolls on the internet. We love that guy. he had 1 from each episode, from each series. TOS, Bread and Circuses. He says one of the most underrated villains in Trek, and I don't think he's wrong there. He had the Time Trap from the animated series, Remember Me from TNG, Dramatis Personae from Deep Space Nine, Dreadnought from Voyager, Breaking the Ice from Enterprise, and The War Without, The War Within from Discovery. That is a fantastic list of sneaky good episodes.
Dreadnought's particularly good because that does just build and build and build and get more difficult as it gets.
It's like the Voyager version of Civil Defense. I love that episode.
Yeah.
Great.
From Melanie at Shuttlepod 2, she had from Discovery, Choose Your Pain. From Enterprise, The Shipment. From Voyager, Prototype. She's talking about our Prime Directive prototype. And Deep Space Nine, she had Vortex, Clues from TNG, and A Taste of Armageddon from TOS. I mean, you can't really go wrong with these sneaky good lists. And finally, from Trevor, who is at Captain Revo on Twitter, he had TOS, the Galileo 7, TNG, Suspicions, which I picked tonight. That's I think might be the first 2 Suspicions references ever on TrekRanks. He had Whispers from Deep Space Nine, Meld from Voyager, a classic, The Council from Enterprise. I love that pick. And Lethe from Discovery. So love those
Meld.
Picks.
Brilliant.
Meld.
Great. Starts as a murder mystery, ends up as a psychological nightmare. I love it.
Meld is beyond is sneaky great. All right, and then one more outstanding list we got with a full 5 words and a hashtag from our buddy Rick Everson, who is at TrekFanRick, and I'm going to rattle off his list. His number 5: Klingon courtship and puppet Quark hashtag plus Kira and Miles looking for Parmog in all the wrong places. Puppet Quark, I love that. We have another puppet. His number 4 was Oh my gosh, I didn't realize this. Dr. Crusher is flippin' awesome. Hashtag metaphysics style. It's suspicions. So we now have 3 suspicions references today.
This is suspicious now. I'm not sure that
this is suspicious.
That's the most love Suspicions has ever gotten anywhere.
That is crazy. Number 3 is Creepy Keiko is so creepy. Hashtag scarier Paul Wraith than Ducat. And that is the assignment, of course. Yep. Is number 2. I actually mentioned this one because it really is sneaky good. And I rate it low on TrekRanks, but I've grown to like it. Children, a Monster, and Tuvok. Hashtag. And Tuvok sings. It is Innocence from Voyager. And is number 1 most amazing new race concept. Hashtag Bev and Riker, but not really. It's the host from TNG. It's sneaky good episodes where Beverly and Riker slept together. Yes, they did. Okay, so once again, those picks more than enough to get us clear of this week's temporal causality loop. So as always, I want to thank everyone again for all your great responses to TrekRanks. Keep your list coming to me at TrekRanks on Twitter so we can retweet them. But we also want to hear from you, so put together your own list of top 5 meta Trek references or any list from our past shows and give us a call at the Tricorder Transmissions at 609-512-5527. That's 609-512-LLAP. Or it occurs to me, you could just record a list and DM it to me on Twitter as well. So we want to hear your list, and we know this is a tough topic, but we'd love to hear some more picks. So hopefully we'll hear from you, and you can be featured on the next episode of TrekRanks. And on the next episode of TrekRanks, we're going to be getting the hype machine started for the return of Captain Jean-Luc Picard to the screen in Star Trek Picard. And we have 3 consecutive special episodes lined up to coincide with the debut episode in January 2020. And first up on that list is our top 5 Borg episodes. We've previously done our top 5 Klingon episodes, and we've done our top 5 Romulan episodes on TrekRanks. And now we're going to do the Borg because obviously the Borg are going to play a pretty big role in this new series. And they have a lot of history with Jean-Luc Picard. So Bill and Ross, if you had to choose one Borg episode off the top of your head, what would it be? Bill, what's your Borg pick?
Discounting the obvious, serious heavyweights, the one that comes to mind the most that probably won't factor into Picard at all, ironically, is Drone. I love Drone. I love the guest star, J. Paul Boehmer. Yeah. I think that's a great guest performance. Great character. Great use of the Doctor in 7. I love that episode. I've always loved it, and it's grown on me more and more over the years. So.
Likewise. 2 J. Paul Boehmer references on TrekRanks tonight. He played Mestral. I Love Lucy is on tonight. Same guy. That's a great deep cut pick. I love it. This is going to be an interesting episode because obviously you've got your big heavy hitters, but there's going to be some personal favorites too. Ross, how about you? What's your Borg episode?
Well, I'm going to pick a heavy hitter because I think the Borg are brilliant. So I'm going to go for iBorg because it is the first time you look at the Borg and you think there's more to them than just this relentless machine which is going to consume us. And perhaps we can do something about it. And I love the fact that we are going to see Hugh again. I cannot tell you how excited I am about that. I think it's amazing.
It's incredible to think that we live in a world where we're going to see Hugh again.
I know.
Jonathan Del Arco. It's so cool. Those are 2 great picks, Drone and iBorg. All right, looking forward to that one. And then we're going to have 2 other great topics that will follow that one, but we're going to keep those secret for now. Well, one of them's obviously Jean-Luc Picard episode. Yeah. But the other one is a little bit of a surprise that's going to be a fun one. Okay, so before we wrap it up here, a huge thanks to Bill Mann and Ross Webster. It was great having you guys on this show. Really appreciate you guys taking the extra time to think this one through. Any final subspace communications you guys want to relay before we depart? Bill?
Follow me on Trek Live on YouTube. You'll find me there most weekends, Saturday, Sunday mornings, live stream conversations about Star Trek, all things Star Trek. And, of course, on Twitter at TrekFan4387. Reviewing episodes, movies, ranking things, polls.
Lots of ranking.
Yes. Check me out.
We love it. And Ross, how about you, man? Hope you had fun.
I just thought that we could have picked the host of TrekRanks as a meta reference because he's also appeared in an episode of Star Trek.
That's true.
Well, I don't know what's real anymore.
My camera was in my pocket, and you can see it on screen. It was like a big 2004 bulky digital camera.
Amazing. You're a time traveler. You can catch me at STRTRK1701. Yeah, I do tweet a lot of Star Trek poetry and TOS reviews at the moment, or at SnapTrek for lots of exciting conversation with me and Jen about 2 episodes of Star Trek, which
love it.
Trek Live and SnapTrek, check them out, people. They're both fantastic. All right, I want to thank everyone again for engaging with us here on episode 71 of the TrekRanks podcast. As always, I want to close by saying I'm looking forward to standing with you again here in this place where I belong.
What was that?
Brent modified the dilithium matrix to maximize the output.
He did he?
He's a very good engineer.
He's also a very good cook. These fried tube grubs are delicious.
Better hope he didn't poison them.
Maybe in our universe he'd do something like that. But not over here. Over here, everything's alternate. So he's a nice guy. Which means the tube grubs here should be poisonous. Because they're not poisonous on our side. But if Brunt gave us poisonous tube grubs, it would mean he wasn't as nice as we think he is. But he has to be nice, because our Brunt isn't.
Rom, you're driving me crazy.
It's not me, brother. It's this alternate universe. It just doesn't make any sense.
More tube grubs.
Yes, please. No. Yes!
Just want to remind everyone again that the entire TrekRanks catalog is available for you to download and listen to at TrekRanks.com and on your podcast player of choice. Our episodes never get carbon dated, so check out the topics you've missed and maybe just want to listen to again over at TrekRanks.com. And a reminder to check out our friends 5-Year Mission at 5yearmission.net. They're writing a song for every episode of Star Trek, and you won't believe how great their music is. They also have a podcast at the Trek Geeks Network, so seek them out. You won't regret it.
Fontaine.
I thought Vic was his favorite singer. No wonder they call it the alternate universe. Hey! You're supposed to be the good guys! My mistake.
Give it a rest, Julius.
I'll give it a rest just as soon as these 3 get what's coming to them.
I don't know about you, but I like Al-Bashir better. Look who the regent is.
So
who's president of the Federation? Goldukat?
They don't have a Federation here.
You mean we're going home?
No. He means you're going to die.
That settles it. I'm never helping you again.
Or anyone else for that matter.
Come along, Al.
I'm really beginning to hate this universe.
This is quite a fascinating place, don't you agree?
I want to go home.